in case you close it, it'll still open up. You need anything else?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So before we do our roll call, I'm just going to make two quick announcements. Beginning this meeting and going forward, all of the CFLCA general meetings will be recorded. So just fair notice, all of this is being recorded. Hal, that's a good question. Where on the city website will the recording be available?
We're going to get the links for you so you can put it out on your website, and then members can link to your website as well.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and can everyone hear okay in the back? Okay, wonderful. All right, roll call.
Okay, and hopefully I won't screw up any names, but have compassion for it if I do. Bal Harbor Homeowners Association.
Here.
Bermuda Riviera Association. Here. Beverly Heights Neighborhood Association. Birch Park Beach Homeowners Association. Central Beach Alliance.
Here.
Coley Hammock Homeowners Association.
Here.
I skipped the Central City Alliance.
Here.
Coral Ridge Association.
Here.
Coral Ridge Isles Homeowners Association.
Here.
Crescent Park Civic Association. No. I'm here. Edgewood Civic Association. Flagler Village Civic Association. Galt Mile Community Association.
Here.
Harbordale Civic Association.
Here.
Harbor Beach Property Owners. Harbor Inlet Association.
Here.
Historic Dorsey Riverbed. Plum Beautiful Park, oh, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. Idlewild Improvement Association. Imperial Point Association.
Here.
Lake Ridge Civic Association.
Here.
Landings Residential Association. Lauderdale Beach HOA.
Here.
Lauderdale Harbors Improvement Association.
Here.
Lauderdale Isles Civic Association. Lauderdale Manors HOA.
Here.
Melrose Manors HOA.
Here.
Middle River Terrace Neighborhood.
Here.
Nurmi Isles Homeowners Association. Poinsettia Heights Civic Association. Progresso Village. Rio Vista Civic Association.
Present.
River Gardens Sweeting Estate. Riverland Preservation Society. River Oaks Civic Association.
Here.
Riverside Park Residents Association.
Here.
Rock Island Community.
Here.
Sail Bend Civic Association. Sailboat Bend. Seven Isles Civic Association. Shady Banks Civic Association. Sunrise Intercoastal Homeowners Association. South Middle River Civic Association.
We're here.
Carpet River Civic Association.
Here.
We didn't plan it. This Monday.
And Victoria Park Civic Association.
Happy to be here. It's here.
Was that here? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I covered it.
Great, wonderful. All right, one other announcement. Beginning this month, board members Michael Alveda and Kelly Manning as alternate are going to act as parliamentarians. So what that basically means is that they will help us keep our meetings on track, help us get out of here at a reasonable hour, and remind us all to be mindful of the need for respectful discourse at all times. Okay, review and acceptance the minutes from the June 11th meeting.
So moved. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No? Okay.
Great. Treasurer's report.
At this particular moment, we have $6,771.82, and our CDs doing nicely, getting 2% on that 5,000. So we will have a quarterly report on that CD.
We read the amount.
5,000?
No, the
Oh,
amount.
6,771.82.
Okay, thank you. All right, and illustrious Lieutenant McCartney is going to get up and give us our police report.
This is your favorite time of the meeting, I know. Everyone had a great summer.
Yes, we did.
So, still hot out there?
It's been hot, yeah.
Tomorrow is the start of school again, everyone knows that, right? So the police department is staffing all the elementary schools, and we do have SROs at all the other schools, such as the high schools, et cetera. But for the start of the school year tomorrow, we are staffing all the schools Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They'll show a presence in the morning and as school gets out. So reminder, don't be speeding through any of the schools now. Okay? For July, 0 homicides. We have 8 forcible sex offenses. Robberies were 29 for the city, just down 17% from June. Aggravated assaults and batteries were 32 for the city, just down 6%. Violent crime total was 69, down 8%. Burglary businesses were 26, that was down 32%. 171 was the number for burglaries of vehicles. Residences were 54. Larceny thefts were 369, which Walmart plays a great deal into that in a couple other locations. Vehicle thefts were 76, and property crime totals for the whole city, all those were 696.
Congratulations.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I don't get to come to as many of these as I would like to. Is that supposed to be for the city as a whole?
Yes, it's the entire city.
Since July?
That's just July, yes.
Okay, and when you talk about homicides, is that, that doesn't include like open,
Excuse me?
when you talk about homicides, that doesn't include like open cases?
No, that's just homicides were 0,
No deaths.
0 last month. No.
There was a dead woman found in our neighborhood, so.
That was just
I was
recently,
curious.
correct?
I'm sorry?
That was just recently, correct?
Like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, August.
Yeah, okay, only the.
I think that was older. I think I know which one you're talking about, but that's earlier in the year.
I'm sorry?
But that's early in the year. That case is being worked, I know about it.
Oh, from 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right, I was just
I
curious.
think a little more than that.
Oh, no, I'm
Okay, so this month. Okay. Anything else?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Chief, we've got you going towards the end with Safer Watch, unless you wanted to,
I'm just here to introduce him. I don't have anything to say.
okay.
I think maybe what you're talking about, every death isn't a homicide. If it's an
That's what I was
overdose, if
trying
it's
to catch.
accidental, it wouldn't be listed. I just confirmed today, we're at 11 for the year. And when you look at what's going on in other cities, Orlando, I think Jacksonville just crossed 100. And these are cities of similar size with similar,
Yeah. She was like.
4 or 5, we're at 11 for the year total.
That's really darn good.
It's remarkable, yeah. Thank you all. Okay, so our first presenter, and we have 4 presenters tonight, so we're going to try to do this quickly. Our first presenter is Keith Farrell. He's a senior management fellow with the City of Fort Lauderdale. And I don't normally do this, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about some of the wonderful people we have on staff. Keith Farrell is an undergraduate in math and political science. He taught high school math for 3 years and then did some work on some political campaigns before pursuing his master's in public administration, which he received, and upon graduation applied for and received the fellowship, the ICYM, something prestigious. But I'd just like to read one of the quotes from the Northeastern website that he wrote, which I loved. He took a course in urban studies and theory. And that professor really made me most interested in local and municipal government, more so than any other layer of government, more so than the state or federal level. I think that's what convinced me to seek out this fellowship. So we're very pleased and happy to have him here. He's going to talk about the new class for the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. Please help me welcome Keith.
And sorry, I just have a few quick slides that I want to go through. So I promise I'll be really brief. I think most of you already know about the Neighbor Leadership Academy. Could I actually see a show of hands of people that know about the Academy already? All right, so almost 80% of you. And then how many of you have already been through the Academy? Could you raise your hand? And about a fourth of you. So this is going to be really quick, but the main purpose of me presenting here tonight is we are now accepting applications for our 6th cohort. Applications are going to be open until the end of the month. And this next course is going to be every Wednesday evening in October for the 5 weeks from 6 to 8 p.m. And so what we really want you guys to do, since so many of you already know about the course, is encourage other people to get involved. This is a great gateway into being more engaged in Fort Lauderdale locally. So there is, if I had a little bit more time, there's this great promotional video that was made about the first couple classes of the Neighbor Leadership Academy. Recommend checking it out. Some people here in the crowd make guest appearances in this video, so one reason to take a look at it. I think the NLA sort of serves two purposes. One, it's sort of like a civics course to let people, local residents, know about the city, who runs the city, what kind of programs the city offers, how you can get more involved in what goes on. And then the other component is more of like a leadership training component to the course, so that we try to create people that will be ambassadors and activists and community organizers that will sort of, stretch the civic muscles of the people of Fort Lauderdale. The curriculum is up here. I also kind of handed out a rack card. On the back side, it also talks a little bit about the curriculum. We talk about the city structure, getting involved in the community, ethics, the city's budget, and then what's in store for Fort Lauderdale's future. There's only a couple requirements for people in order to be considered. One, they have to be 18 years old. They have to live in Fort Lauderdale. They have to be able to commit to all 5 courses, and then they have to engage in sort of a capstone community project at the end. So the city gives sort of a disproportionate amount of resources to the people that participate in this program, and then what we ask in return is that you sort of give back to the community in some way. And then that's an open, whatever the project is, it's different from cohort to cohort. This last cohort did a clothing drive for the homeless that was really successful. You might have heard about that. And so we work collaboratively with the people that are engaged in the course and come up with a good capstone for the community. And one of the things that we like to promote about the NLA is that it is sort of a gateway to being more involved in the city. So almost 60% of our graduates are involved in their local HOA. Almost 30% are involved in CFLCA, this wonderful group right here. Similarly, about half are involved in the volunteer office through the city or certified in CERT. It's a wonderful program. It's held at George English Park, and you can find it on our website. There's also an email on the back of the rack cards if you have any questions. I will say we accept about 20 to 22 people for each cohort. We've already had 38 people apply, but we still, we're going to look at everyone at the end of the month. So applications are open till the last day of August. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. And I would just add that this is going to be a more highly competitive program with each class. So if you haven't enrolled yet and you would like to, I would do it sooner rather than later, because it's become quite popular and it's well curated, and I think the content is wonderful. Yes, Jerry?
Is this the only time it's going to be held? Is there another class?
There's going to be there's one in the fall and then another cohort in the spring.
So twice annually. Okay, thank you. Our next presenter is Alan Malo. And as you all know, Alan is the city attorney for the city of Fort Lauderdale. What you may not know is that he's an AV-rated litigation and appellate attorney. And what that means to get an AV rating, for those of you non-attorneys in the room, is that it's the highest rating that you can receive from your fellow colleagues, fellow attorneys and fellow judges. So he's a very well-respected and qualified attorney with 19 years of experience in government, in litigation, in legislative issues, and more. He has represented us, the city of Fort Lauderdale, since 2001 in various capacities. He's admitted to practice in all state courts in Florida, the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the United States Supreme Court. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from FIU and his Juris Doctor from Nova Southeastern. Mr. Boileau graciously agreed to present to us tonight, in layman's terms, a summary of the recently passed House Bill 7103. We invited Alan to speak tonight because of concerns raised by this council. He is here to clarify the impact this legislation has for the council membership and for the residents of Fort Lauderdale. Straight talk from an attorney. Please help me welcome Alan.
Thank you. It's good to be before you again. I was here before a few months ago. Can you hear me back there? I'm going to try to talk as loud as possible. That being said, thank you very much. Very nice introduction. To follow that, I've created a very basic and incredibly unimpressive PowerPoint to try to kind of go through this pretty big bill that's been the subject of a lot of conversations, a lot of questions coming through my office with regards to this. So I created a small PowerPoint. It actually amends 16 different statutes, so there's a lot of components. Some of them apply directly to us, others don't. For example, the first two deal only with the county. But the ones highlighted in black are those that I want to speak about that have promulgated more of the questions and more of the conversations surrounding this bill. I won't necessarily follow them in that order, but obviously I'll be able to take your questions if you have anything that comes up. The first one, actually, 166.023, affects us internally probably more than any of the others because it deals with our issuance of development permits and orders. And it's two components. The first is a timeline that sort of putting the municipality's feet to the fire. When a developer now brings an application for development permit, we have 30 days to decide whether that application is sufficient. Usually through staff, we'll take a look at it and make sure they've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and checked off the right boxes. We have 30 days to do that. Once, obviously, if it's, everything's fine, it goes forward. If not, we, as we typically do, we'll make comments and have them come back and give us adequate responses, hopefully, to the particular issues and deficiencies that we found. They have 30 days to do that. So you're looking at a 60-day period that from presentation of the application to us moving forward with it. If it does go forward, We then have only 120 days, or if it goes to quasi-judicial, such as site level 4, that's going to go to the city commission, you have 180 days to basically get to the point where you're going to have an approval with conditions or a denial of the application. So it is sort of truncating the process a bit, which is going to be challenging for staff, because they do have to do a whole lot within there. Now, it does provide that both parties can agree to an extension of time, but both parties have to agree. So it's not just a matter of, everybody's got to be on board. So if the city decides they don't want to, then they have to proceed forward, and then we're stuck to those particular guidelines. That's on the timeline issue. The other practical component of it is before, when we had a resolution either denying or approving with conditions a development permit, we would have to provide, obviously, written notice to the applicant, and we'd have to cite to the applicable portions of the ordinance, the rule, the statute, what we were basing our decision on. What's been added now, as is highlighted in black, is we now have to have written findings as well, which sort of goes against case law. Typically, in a quasi-judicial setting, the governmental body did not have to provide a factual basis for its decision. Now we do, from this standpoint. So, once the City Commission has a quasi-judicial hearing, or even P&Z, those findings are somewhat, we won't be able to replicate the full record, obviously, within a resolution, but there will have to be some stated factual findings supporting the decision whether to grant or deny. Practically for the Commission, that's basically what it's going to be. The resolution, the language is going to change, and we're going to do some after the fact adding after the hearing, obviously, because we obviously cannot beforehand know specifically all the discussions and the basis for the decision. On the Planning and Zoning Board, it's going to be a little bit more. Up until this point, the decisions were not memorialized with a particular document. Basically, they were relying on the minutes and the records of the particular proceedings. So now, in order to comply with this statute, we are going to have the Planning and Zoning Board actually issue an order or issue a resolution, which will have those same formalities with regards to citation to the proper criteria, as well as the findings. And although it gets into the weeds a little bit, but it's also going to require a negative. So for example, if there's a proposal to approve something and it fails, that won't be sufficient. There then will have to be one that is asking for a denial, and at that point, because we're going to have that written finding for denial or approval. So that's more of an internal staff type thing that we're going to have to proceed with going forward. Makes it a little bit more challenging, but we'll be fine there. The other issue I decided to bring up was affordable housing, because there were questions raised about that. I think at the last commission meeting there were some discussions on it as well, although technically right now it doesn't really have a direct application to us, because we do not currently have an inclusionary housing ordinance, nor do we mandate affordable housing units to be included. But to the extent that that may be coming in the future, if there's an affordable housing component where that's going to be codified, we are going to have to follow this particular provision. Essentially, if we require them to use or have, as part of an ordinance, the affordable units, we have to fully offset all their costs in regards to that. That's sort of troubling language, because nobody really knows what fully offset all costs means. Presumably, you're going to have a motivated developer who is going to be wanting to develop, so I think that's going to be ironed out through negotiations with each particular developer. So I don't know that it's going to be an issue if it comes up, but that may get litigated throughout Florida, because that could really open up the doors. What really is a full offset to all costs? But it does provide some examples of some incentives that can be provided in exchange for the use of the affordable units, as stated there. Some density and intensity bonuses, reducing some waiver fees or impact fees, and other incentives, which obviously we can come up with through the negotiation process. The other one, this is actually interesting, and it's going to be somewhat of a help. Some of you have been frustrated with some of the extensions that folks have had whenever the governor declares a state of emergency. And we've had instances in the past where the governor has declared an emergency, for example, because of the Zika outbreak in Miami-Dade. That was statewide, he issued it, and folks were coming up and getting extensions for 6 months on their development permits and so on and so forth. Now it's limited for natural emergencies. That's not necessarily defined anywhere, but presumably there will be hurricanes, anything with a natural emergency, but I'm sure folks will push the limit as to what natural really means. So we may see some litigation on that as well, but who knows. Impact fees. This really codifies something that developers currently have a right of action for what's called exactions, which is basically a local government coming in and saying, if you want to build here, you got to give me this. And that's not necessarily law in Florida. So there is a statute already on that, 70.45, which gives the developer a right of action to challenge the governmental entity to do that. What this section is doing now, the amendments to it, is codifying the case law on it, where your impact fees have to be proportional and reasonably connected to basically the capital facilities and the increased impact created by that particular development. And you have to have a rational nexus test, which again has been around in the case law for quite some time, but now it's codified. So it makes it, you really, in layman's term, your impact fees are really going to have to be connected to the need created by that particular development. So, perfect example is traffic, things of that sort. You know, the direct impact that that particular development is going to have. The same thing goes with the expenditure of those funds. The expenditure of those funds are going to have to be related to what's being essentially the impact created by that particular development. So to the extent governments maybe have created, maybe not a good term, but a slush fund with regards to particular impact fees, it's going to be a lot more difficult for governments now, local governments, to be able to spend it the way they want to. And they have to be specifically earmarked as well, regarding acquiring, constructing, or improving capital facilities to benefit new users. So there are a lot more restrictions in that regard.
To benefit new users, yes.
Q&A.
What about the
Q&A.
Right, well, it's also, I mean, I think arguments could be made also with current use, but if you have a new residential structure coming up, obviously there's going to be some additional impacts, for example, parks, where you're going to create more parks because you have more residents. So if that nexus is there, no problem. Other restrictions, the revenues generated by the impact fees now may not be used to pay existing debt or supplant what's previously been earmarked on previously approved project. Again, unless that expenditure is reasonably connected and has a rational nexus. So everything's got to be connected. It's logical, but it wasn't necessarily codified before. I think the city's always done that, but now it's codified for those that had any doubt. And of course, there's a waiver for impact fees for affordable housing. I know I'm going through this fast, but it's a very comprehensive document. We could be here for hours. This has garnered a lot of discussion as well, 163, 32, 15. And I sort of had the basics on there because not everyone always understands what the limitations are here. Under 163, which deals with the comprehensive plan, this gives essentially any aggrieved or adversely affected party the ability to sue the local government. So this deals with lawsuits against us here at the city, challenging any decisions that the city makes with regards to development which materially alters the use or density or intensity of the use on a particular piece of property, which is inconsistent essentially with the comp plan. So these are called comp plan inconsistency challenges. They're usually in the form of declaratory judgment action, sometimes injunctive, but typically it's a DEC action. For example, in the Edgewater litigation we have now with the election, that's one of the complaints that they filed. They used 3 different avenues, but that's one of the avenues where they filed the DEC action under 163. Certain groups tend to do that also. It's easier to have standing and jurisdiction with regards to these actions because it's any aggrieved or adversely affected party. So you don't have to be residing immediately next to development, things of that sort. So it makes it a lot easier to get your foot in the door, but they're very difficult to prove. We spent many, many years, if you recall, with the Icon and Stranahan House. That was one of the big challenges, the 163 challenges. They have a tendency to pop up, but they're difficult to prove inconsistencies with the comp plan. So that's the basic under that subsection 3. Two things that they've added. One, there's a summary procedure under section 51.011. That's just a very truncated pleading and litigation process. Nothing magical about it, but instead of 20 days to respond to a complaint, for example, you only have 5 days. You're allowed depositions, but not written discovery unless the court permits it. So it's just a very truncated sort of process to get it moving along. But they do allow now the court, if the court deems that the parties should not go through the summary process, the court can waive that. And then, of course, the big one, the prevailing party in a challenge gets their attorney's fees and costs, including appellate attorney's fees. Again, that's if you're suing the government, if you're suing us, and you lose. We're entitled to attorney's fees and costs. So, for example, with the election, if that challenge fails, we'd be entitled under the statute to attorney's fees and costs. The other section...
From who?
I'm sorry?
From who?
Can we defer questions until the end, please?
Okay.
The losing party. The prevailing party, whoever prevails is going to get paid their attorney's fees and costs. Yeah, I can take the questions at the end. I only have a couple left. This deals with, I know this issue came up with regards to condominiums and the retrofit for fire sprinklers. What they've gone ahead is pushed the date to January 2024, and they've also added a component where you have to retrofit for the fire sprinkler system or an engineered life safety system. I've delved into the specifics of engineered life safety system, but it's very complicated, so I'll defer you to the fire service for that. But essentially, it's sort of a modified sprinkler system as well. There's smoke suppression, smoke detection, and other types of things that an engineer that is well-versed in fire safety can provide as an alternate to a full retrofit. But that now, we cannot, the local authority having jurisdiction can't require that to be done to the condos, which are 70 feet or higher. I believe there's 63 in the city until or before January 1st, 2024. So there's more time now for the associations to deal with that issue. And lastly, they've added a section which essentially, as part of that, what they call a data call for the state fire marshal to collect all the data regarding these particular buildings that don't have the sprinkler systems. Again, I believe I think it's been a year or so, but I think there's about 63 of them here in the city where this data is going to be collected, provided to the state fire marshal, and then reports are going to be generated and provided to the governor, the president, the Senate, Speaker of the House, presumably to evaluate the need to potentially change that date 2024 or make the requirements more stringent. And that's basically it. There's a lot of other things in the bill, but these are the ones that are most impactful to the city, I think, at least from my perspective. Yes.
Okay, I have 2 questions, Al. My
Yep.
first one,
They need to hear you.
okay, so my 2 questions, my first one, I'm going to refer to your slide that covered 166.033.
Yep.
You covered the practical applications, and you said that essentially the discussion was going to happen, and after the discussion was done, the findings would be written up.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that that could come back to be a problem that you get accused of after the fact creating issues to beef up what you're doing?
Well,
Will that be an issue?
Someone can always raise that argument, but in any challenges, if it goes to court or in any challenges, the court is still going to look at the full record. So we would never, you can't deviate from the record. I mean, someone could try, but
Right.
we would never do that. We're going to try to have the language limited enough where, I mean, obviously we can't have a full dissertation on what, and replicate what's been discussed over 2 hours on the building. So obviously we're going to have a citation to the appropriate sections that they're relying on. And then the findings, for example, that, they didn't meet the traffic study, things of that sort. So we'll try to stay general enough, because ultimately, if it's challenged, the purpose behind it is to provide the developer sufficient notice, although at that point, they're so involved in the process, they'll know exactly why. But regardless of what we put in the resolution, they'll know exactly why it's being denied. But it provides the notice of that, and then to the extent it's taken any further, we'll have the full record. But could someone raise that argument?
Okay, understood. Okay, may I just ask my next question? Okay, so my next one references your slide with the prevailing party fees, 163.3215. I just want to restate to you the way I understood this to make sure I'm hearing it properly, because what I heard you say is not what I've been hearing.
Right.
So the way that I understood this prevailing parties scenario applies when somebody sues the government. Only applies when somebody sues the government.
Only when they sue the government, and only if it's to challenge the comprehensive plan, or alleging that whatever the city's doing through this development is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, government must be a party. So we don't have to worry, oh, we said something. Okay, got it.
Go back, see over here. Any aggrieved party or adversely affected party may maintain a de novo action for declared against any local government.
Okay,
So that's it.
got
It's
it.
the only cause of action you can. Rarely do you see injunctive relief. Typically, like I said, it's a deck action, but it's always against the local
Okay,
government.
thanks.
The Florida chapter of the American Planning Association made a big pitch to try and not get this approved.
Right.
And which to me means that they're very concerned, planners are very concerned about this section and the impact that it will have on challenges to development orders, which may or may not be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So therefore, I'm a little more concerned about it than you made it sound as a problem. So let me make sure I understand.
This is because this is good for me.
This is good for you. The
It's great
city
for
loves
me.
this because now nobody can sue
I don't know if
the
the
city.
city does, but its attorney
The
does.
city does.
It makes it a lot harder. Anything that makes it harder to sue my client, I'm happy.
Well, my concern is that as we go through our public process, okay, and we engage in the give and take of all of this, what is the exposure to the civic associations and the people in these civic associations who are against the project, let's say, okay? And does that all get wrapped up in the public process before the development approval? And should we be concerned
Not for
about
the
this?
prevailing part, because this only applies if you sue me
Okay.
and lose.
So you're the only one, no, let's take a different scenario.
Yeah.
We are opposed to a project, and
Yeah.
you approve a project,
Yeah.
and then we sue you.
Yes.
Do we have to pay the developer's attorneys too, or just your attorneys?
Depends if you're going to be, for example, with the Icon and Friends of Stranahan House, we were in for I think 14 years. There were multiple parties to that because Friends of Stranahan House sued the city, but necessarily also brought in the related group, which eventually was Coolidge, and then it changed a variety of names. So there were 3 parties there. The losing party will have to pay attorney's fees. So if there's 2 defendants, if the developer is included in there, for whatever reason, whether they are joined as an indispensable party or whether they intervene, because they can choose to intervene, they possibly, yes, would.
All right, well, therein lies the problem, because if you approve a project, and the 100 Friends of Florida, or the Sierra Club, or the Council of Civic Associations, probably would never happen, we don't get into that, but let's just say the Harbordale Civic Association, okay? We sue you because we disagree with your approval. And the
Well,
developer...
it's more than disagree. You'd have to have a legitimate argument that it's inconsistent with the comp plan.
Exactly, okay. Well, we believe it's inconsistent with the
Right.
comprehensive plan. And the developer joins you in defending your position. If I lose, I have to pay you, I have to pay the developer, I have to pay yada yada, and you know the developer's gonna join you because he's the beneficiary of the...
Potentially, it depends what, again.
He's
it's
the
gonna-
beneficiary. Bahia Law would join you because Bahia Law got an approval that made them rich. So they would join you in defending your action, and if the Civic Association loses, we have to pay everybody. You can see why everybody is a little concerned.
Yeah, no, there's
As long
no...
as we clarify that that is the
Right.
case.
But a lawsuit has to be involved, it has
Yeah,
to be
okay.
under 163, and it has to be for challenges to the comp plan. It's
Well,
not...
that was clearly why the planners, the advocacy planners at any rate, the other planners are on the other side now, but the advocacy planners were very concerned because this, I would never take my civic association into a lawsuit right now. I used to be able to say, well, you know, what could happen? You know, the city. But now it's everybody, and we just lost our
But in
ability.
all the years, though, I've been in these kinds of cases for almost 20 years, I think the only one I've seen where a group rather than the developer challenged the city was recently with the Sequest issue with, I think, with PETA suing us. They're trying to go under 163, because that's the only way they can get
What about the
standing.
icon?
Well, the icon wasn't a civic association, it was the neighbor.
The neighbor, the
No, I
civic
understand, well,
association.
it's different.
So it
because
happens
there
quite-
was a different standing issue here, but, okay.
But whoever has standings to sue and sues
Mhm.
ends up paying everybody who wins.
Well, the legislature.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of money to, excuse me.
We don't get them often, though. Again, the only time we really seen them is with the developers, usually on the denial.
Okay. So if we join you in defending your action and the developer loses, he pays us too? Damn.
Unless you become unless you figure out how to become a government.
Strategy. We can become a government.
I think we should become a bank, but...
Melinda's next, followed by this young man, and Luis.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Alan. Melinda Balker. I just wanted to ask, and just to clarify, I know you've given a great explanation, but for our membership and our civic association, since this has been discussed quite a bit, there's no concern for individuals or civic associations' public participation if you're not actually filing a lawsuit?
Right. This only applies if you file a lawsuit.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But again,
Or enjoined.
What?
So Stan, we've got a lineup of questioners.
Okay, so,
Did you,
this gentleman,
was that question
enjoined would be an
answered?
injunction, and it's still a lawsuit. You still have to go to a court of law, so it's still a lawsuit. But to the extent that any of your associations have individual concerns or things, again, I can't give you legal advice. I'm the city's attorney, so I can interpret this, as written. But to the extent you have any concerns, I can't give you advice on how you should or should not engage your government because of these concerns. You should see, an attorney for that, because I'm not by law required. I mean, not required, but I'm not allowed to give you that advice.
Makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Does the affordable housing provision put the cost of affordable housing on all the taxpayers as opposed to just the developers or individual owners, renters of the premises?
That's you have to give me more specifics than that. That's a very, very broad,
Well, it's in there that the city has to reimburse all the costs of any affordable housing.
Right, well, yeah, the argument can be made, definitely depending on the incentives. Obviously, if there's a reduction in impact fees or there's a waiver, things of that sort, certainly that does, essentially it does. I guess you could argue that.
Second question, impact fees seem to apply only to capital facilities and not to services?
I believe so, yeah.
Interesting. Luis?
In your opinion, this seems to be something coming from the state and regulating development and some things at the local level. I don't know how familiar you will be with other states, but is the state of Florida becoming or making this easier for developers to come and do whatever they want without us or even the cities having in any way, shape or form the way to control that? It's just kind of like a free-for-all as long as they, have the money?
Depends who
And
you
how
ask.
compares
Depends who you ask.
to other states?
It depends. I couldn't compare other states, and frankly, I mean, each state is different when it comes to that. I don't think it's, some can argue this is obviously developer friendly, but again, yes and no. I mean, to the extent that they can't get extensions anymore unless it's a hurricane or some natural
I
disaster.
think it's so friendly that it's almost a date. It's so friendly to the developers that it's almost a take.
But I don't think it puts the city in any worse position, but again, that's just the city. I can only speak for
That's
the
the city.
city.
And I understand that this is your job to defend the city.
Because, I mean, from a development standpoint, you know, besides the truncated timeframes, the extra steps I have to go through, those things of that sort, it doesn't really change the process a whole lot beyond that. So there's not that much of an impact besides more of an internal type thing for us.
So just a reminder, since we are being recorded, if you have a question, please introduce yourself and your neighborhood. So that was Louis Castillo
Luis
from
Castillo, South Middle River.
South Mill River. Yes, young man?
A couple questions.
Your name?
Matt Tillman from Riverside Park. One is to follow on her hypothetical where a civic association joins in suing the city and then a developer joins in to defend themselves. If the city plus developer loses, which one of the two pays the civic association?
Well, it depends on the case, but typically, and it depends on a lot of factors, but either could or both could.
Who's going to be in charge of deciding that?
The judge.
Judge, okay. And the other question, apologies if I'm going to ask a question about the affordable housing. That's exactly what caused the stir you're alluding to, because I haven't really had my ear to the ground on that. But one thing that jumps out at me is that, so, you know, there's all these ways that options for ways to offset the cost. Does it also prescribe in the bill in detail how to calculate the cost? Because it seems like a shady developer could inflate the costs and get their money back, but it was a false cost.
Yeah, but I think, you know, you also have a developer that wants to develop, so, you know, they can come in and have a high price tag in that regard, but they're not going to get to build anything. It's not like we have to accept whatever it is they give us. It will be a negotiation type process. So, again, right now, because we don't have an inclusionary housing ordinance, it wouldn't apply. But to that extent, I don't think, could it? Yeah, there's no way to calculate it, and there's no definition of, like I said, what fully offset all costs means. How far to the future do you go? What financial impact does it have on the developer? I highly suspect that's going to be an issue for litigation in the many years to come, unless they change it next year or do some kind of
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Your name?
Jim Concan, Sunrise Intercoastal. What was the genesis of this? Who started, and what was the motivation for this whole modification?
That's, again, you're looking at 16 different statutes. I don't know exactly who the proponent of this particular bill was. It went through a lot of iterations. I know there was some last minute stuff. I mean, it goes through this whole process, the political process up in Tallahassee. I couldn't begin to explain the whole process because most of it is unexplainable. But but I don't know who the sponsor was. I don't know. But clearly, you know, obviously there's lobbyists up there, and the most some obvious one.
Can we ask,
Introduce yourself.
Marilyn Malo from Harbordale? We have lobbyists up in Tallahassee. Did the city oppose this legislation?
Sure.
We opposed it.
Yeah. We certainly, but again, you know, there's only so much we can do.
Well, I can tell you all the local representatives who voted for it, if you like. Anybody's interested, I can tell you every name who voted for it.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back?
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Hi. Janae Gray Williams, and I represent part of Rock Island as well as Sweeting Estate. And I have a couple of comments and questions. While we're on this page already for affordable housing, I wanted to inquire. I see here, and thank you, Adam. I see here for, I want to say CD or B and C in particular, A, B, and C there. We talked about affordable housing and the inclusionary when it comes to developers. But I wanted to speak in regards to when it comes to the homeowners, that piece. And I know it says here that it is allowing you to be able to reduce or waive the fees, including the impact fees, the water and the sewer charges as well, and as well as other incentives. Now, my question is, because when we talk about the impact fees, in which I'm getting ready to go into that next, this is strictly when it comes to the affordable housing for the developer.
Correct.
So, when it comes to the homeowner that is part of the affordable housing project, with the community redevelopment, is this also language and verbiage that will be included for the homeowner?
No, not the way it's written, not the way it's been. This is strictly to offset the cost to the developer for including affordable housing units. It doesn't have any language with regards to, and again, I'm just talking about the amendments. There's no language with regards to the homeowner there. It's strictly to make the developer whole, what it attempts to.
Okay. Now, I have a question to ask you. Would you consider taking that as a concern? Because when it comes to the piece that the homeowners have to have a responsibility on, and the impact fees are, in which I'm going to the next session, 163-31801, impact fees. Okay. And as a result, when it comes to the impact fees, I know personally for myself and my family, that was huge. That was something that we knew nothing about until we were already there at the door. And it was thrown in our lap that we had to come up with $10,000 for impact fees, and only by the grace of God that I'm as versatile as I am to make a lot of phone calls and to reach out to a lot of different people. And I had to leave City of Fort Lauderdale, go to the county, go to the school board, and make all these different contacts with all the different people involved when it comes to the taxing and the buildings and all of that, only to come back to getting a waiver from the county, and the county having to contact the City of Fort Lauderdale, and then for it to go through as a waiver from the county, and then once all the work was done for a waiver for the City of Fort Lauderdale Community Development to say that the county would be the first on the deed for a lien holder, and it would supersede the City of Fort Lauderdale's lien. So as a result, the City of Fort Lauderdale Community Development, the CRA and all of that, had to pay it totally outright and then charge me as a lien on the property until X amount of years. So my question is, it says here now that you all have waivers. Is that waivers now for the homeowner under impact fees?
No.
Or there's no waiver still that's provided for a homeowner, so someone like me would have to
For
go
affordable
through-
housing, potentially, but your case sounds very unique. It's got a lot of facts, so we can talk about that. You may want to contact my office and we can sit down and talk about all the different, because yours is highly factual. I don't know that it really deals with this here, but we can walk through it and see if we can answer your question.
Okay.
There, I'll give you my card and you can call.
Thank you.
Set up the meeting. Okay.
I appreciate that. And the last question, concern is, and thank you all for your patience. And the last question and concern is, when it comes to the new timeline for permits. I see where you have to respond now with the permitting department, which was reduced down to 30 days, that the permit department must, and that's under section 163-31801.
Do what?
163-31801.
Right. That's the impact.
Okay, and I believe that's the first page. And it talks about the new timelines for permits. to respond within 30 days. Now, when we talk about the total time frame of, I believe you said
120 days or 180 days for quasi-judicial, yeah.
Okay, and the reason that I wanted to find out about that is because I know, and again, a personal situation, and I know if I went through it, I want to try to streamline the process so others don't have to go through it, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. That when it comes to individuals, one on vacation, individuals that are retiring from their position as permit workers, individuals that lose their job and they have to replace them, paperwork doesn't sit on one person's desk for 60 days or 120 days before it's responded. So my question to you is, have they streamlined the process through this new timeline so that it would be speedier in getting a permit in and out the door, because mine took 2 years?
Well, to the extent, that's a question more for DSD as to whether, I mean, we're under these constraints now, but again, depending on the permit you're talking about, and with regards to special circumstances, there are provisions for extensions of time to be agreed to by the parties. So again, I think you and I need to talk, and we can have a longer discussion about what may be in place to accommodate that.
Definitely. Thank you all so much for your time, and I appreciate it. And it seems like it's getting better between you and Brother Michael. Christopher right there, Brother Christopher, is getting better, so I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Any other last questions before we shut this down? A lot of good points raised, a lot of points relevant to the legislation, a lot of points that are more broad, process re-engineering for some of our other departments and applications, no doubt.
If your associations have particular questions that weren't addressed tonight, again, can't give legal advice, but you're welcome to contact my office and we can sit down, and if there's additional concerns or you need more information, we can certainly do that.
Wonderful.
All right.
Please thank Alan for the... That's wonderful. Okay, so our next wonderful presenter is
a big assumption earlier.
Our beloved city manager, Chris Lagerboom. So I'm not going to go through his bio because it's way too long, but I will mention that he has been a city manager in a few other places in the United States, and as city manager of Milton, Georgia, he achieved national accolades, including being named the city with the best quality of life in Georgia, one of America's 100 safest cities, a certified green community, and a certified city of ethics. He's brought a lot of innovation here. I think he's done a lot with the organizational culture. He's here tonight specifically to talk about the budget, the proposed budget.
Correct.
Where the money is, where it's going, and how we're going to be more efficient and productive with less, I'm sure, is part of the equation. Please help me. Please help me welcome Chris.
Good evening and thank you. I know your meetings run from 6:30 to 8:30, and I could talk about this budget for the balance of the next 3 or 4 hours, but I won't. I'll try to give a real quick summary and overview, and maybe some of the thought process behind how it came together, how it was built, where it is in the process, and where it needs to go to be able to get to something that the commission adopts so that we have a budget that we can operate with in our next fiscal year. As you know, we run October 1 to September the 30th as a fiscal year. We have some target things that we have to do in July that is charter driven, and some target things we have to do in September. I'll talk about those briefly in a couple minutes. But let me start generally with how we built this proposed budget this year. There was a challenge from our commission. This challenge existed last year as well, and it will exist for the next couple of years, and that was that we take the money that has been always transferred into the general fund from the utility in this form of this this verb that we have now termed ROI, and it's funny how we take acronyms and we turn them into actions. But this thing that we did to ourselves is this verb called return on investment, where we were taking money from the utility, which is an enterprise fund that runs itself, and we were transferring it into the general fund. We weren't going to get into the debate as to whether or not that's appropriate to do or not, or what its intent was, but this commission has said we want to stop doing it. It amounts to a $20 million figure that was coming out of the utility going into the general fund, and the commission challenged and said, we want to see you take $5 million out last year, $10 million out this year, 15 next year, and 20 the year after that. We sort of did that last year, but not really. As a city, the budget that was brought to the commission was brought without any recommended modifications, changes, strategic reductions. It just came and said you need to raise the millage rate X number of mills to be able to account for the $5 million, and we think that's the way to balance the budget. And if you happen to follow along, the commission in their meeting in September from the dais found $5 million that they sort of hatcheted out of the budget. The unfortunate thing is most of the reductions that they made came as one-time capital projects, and if you know anything about budgeting, you know that if you do something that doesn't recur, you don't have the same outcome in the second year, third year, or fourth year. So we sort of had what I would call an unstructured, a structurally unbalanced budget. It was balanced, but it wasn't structurally balanced in that we didn't do what maybe the commission had asked us to do. So we took a stronger look at that this year, and we really, as a team and as a staff and as Budget Advisory Board's been weighing in, as well as just independent advice along the way, we really looked at the budget and said, we want to take something back to the commission that accomplishes what they asked us to do, rather than just assuming that there's nothing that we can do to strategically make some wise either partnerships or cuts. Let's just take another millage increase back and say, we told you this last year, and we're going to come tell you it again this year. So we built a budget that, in fact, I'll get to the end and then I'll work my way back. We built a budget that we're able to make a recommendation to the commission that they hold the millage rate flat a year for this year, again at 4.1193 mills. But the budget that is proposed to them does, in fact, structurally remove, through some things that I'll talk about here tonight, takes and fines a little bit more than the $10 million that they wanted us to find in year two. So happy to report that we're not coming with a millage rate increase request of the commission. They have already voted on holding the millage rate steady for one additional year. I'll tell you, and I've told them, that I recognize that probably they're holding it for 2 consecutive years, because as a city manager, I have never been successful in convincing a commission to go for a millage rate increase at the same time there's a re-election going on. Don't know for certain, but if history is a good indicator of the future, next year will not be a year for a millage rate increase request either. So a couple of things about our budget, just very high level. All funds, about $785 million budget this year. 330-ish, $338 million of that is in what we call the general fund. General fund is usually what people are concerned about, because that's what property tax funds, that's what ad valorem funds, that's what funds much of the public safety services that you see in the city. 70% of the general fund is gobbled up in both the police and fire department. And that's the fund that we had to look to do some reductions in. When you look at what is non-personnel related costs in the general fund, it's $26 million. So if in 4 years you're saying $20 million in reductions in the general fund, of which a fund only has $26 million that is not salary based, you can recognize quite quickly that this is going to be a difficult task to tackle, and it's going to have to be tackled creatively. Because I really don't want to come to a meeting like this, or a meeting with the commission, and say the strategic way of reducing this money out of the general fund is to do a different level of service in our public safety departments, because they're so critical to us as a city and our success. So you say, how do you do it? Part of how we did it, and I'll be right up front and say that our property tax digest is strong. We did recognize a tax digest increase over the previous fiscal year from the property appraiser tax assessor's office of just over $10 million, which is good. I can also tell you, though, that our contractual wage obligation increases based upon the contracts that we have with employees that we collectively bargain with, ate up all of that $10 million. And so if you say, where'd your benefit come from? or where did that benefit, where did it get applied? It got applied to fund the wage increase obligation that we had based upon the collective bargaining agreements. We also had about $1 million increase in health care coverage for our employees, and that's something that we needed to figure out how to offset. So those are two sort of big ones that hit us right off the bat. Yes, the property digest was up, but we saw quite quickly where it was going to end up. One of the conversations we've had with the commission is something we do every 3 years, is we look back at our fire assessment fee and see if it can be restructured. It's a 3-year look back where we take the actual costs of fighting fires, not transporting people in ambulances, but fighting fires. And we can look back and say, do we want to do some type of a full cost recovery on that at a per single family household basis? We were charging, if you looked at your tax bill, you would see a number $256 on the tax bill. Based upon the formula, we were eligible to go to $311. I made a recommendation that the Budget Advisory Board went against, as well as the Commission went against, which is fine. And that was to step that up over 2 years from $256 to $311. And both of those bodies made the recommendation, and ultimately the Commission made the recommendation, or the decision, to go all the way to $311 in the first year. So what does that amount to in real money? It amounts to about $8 million to the general fund budget. So right now I have a budget that I presented to the Commission because they had to have the budget message. There is about $3.5 million now that they have created in the budget that I have not allocated in the balanced budget. I'll bring a recommendation to them that they allow that to roll to our reserves as we look towards the bond market later this year in the police bond and the parks bond that you know that the voters were nice enough to allow us to enhance our community with in March, and we'll see what ultimately they want to do. I believe that we're going to see the Commission in September in their public hearings seek to add some additional funds towards the good work that we are doing in our attempts at reducing our homelessness issue in downtown Fort Lauderdale. I think you'll see that they got some projects or some nonprofits that they might want to support that we haven't in the past, but I really think we're sort of honed in on a budget that will go to the Commission, and there's not a lot of changes from this point forward. Let me touch on something that I don't know to be brought up here, but I'm going to touch on it because it's about what I've heard about for the last month. And anytime I've had a budget that I've presented to a commission, whether here or elsewhere, there's always one topic that seems to take the day, and it seems to generate the most discussion. The take of the day in this particular budget is some of the requests that we've made that slightly restructure our transportation and mobility departments. Let me talk about that just real quickly. As we start to look at where we align service, one of the things that I did early on was see where we could look towards where we might have duplication and see if we could eliminate duplication. And that's a great way to look at a budget and say, how can we do this a different way? One of the ways I looked at, and the chief will cringe, is I said, we could hire the sheriff to do law enforcement services in Fort Lauderdale, so we just looked up. Because there is another law enforcement agency. I use this as an illustration, we would never do it, but there is another law enforcement agency that we could buy services from, and if we could buy them cheaper, that's a way to reduce general fund expense. One of the things that we looked at was department by department, and with where we are right now with the countywide sales tax, the petty tax, surtax, not sales tax, countywide surtax, that is all implemented and distributed through the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We've had conversations for years now as to how we could enhance our relationship with the county's regional planning department, and I think there's an opportunity for us to have a strategic alignment with the MPO this year. Everybody got all panicked because they thought we were abdicating our responsibility for transportation. And I said that once, I've heard it many times. You can get a thunder about that. That is the furthest thing from the truth. We are not wholesale taking a department and saying you no longer exist here, you exist in the MPO. We have a proposal at this point that we can purchase some planning services from the regional organization, and we can look to plan more regionally and locally at the same time. I can tell you we will continue to have transportation people in our city. We have almost 2,800 employees in the city. We will continue to be the implementer of transportation technologies, methodologies, and all that good stuff. I have gone to our staff based upon the small number of employees that it is, that we might be eliminating one box off the chart and say we're gonna have somebody else do this for us. We're an organization that's large enough that on any given day I have 150 boxes open on the chart. So I did go to our staff and I said, this isn't about losing a bunch of talented, qualified people. I think we're just going to leverage your talents differently, and we will, with certainty, this is not a pink slip event. We will find places for our talented staff to remain in our organization if they choose to. I wasn't able to talk about this in July like I wanted to. Sometimes stories get away from you and then you try to catch them. The reason we didn't talk about it in July and I had to publish this book ahead of time is because both our city commission, if we choose to adopt this interlocal agreement, and the MPO board has to adopt the interlocal agreement. And at the one meeting I had before our commission took their recess, at the MPO level, both the executive director, Greg Stewart, he was in China, and Mayor Trentalis, who is a board member of ours on the MPO, was in Colombia. And so I chose not to have an interlocal agreement of this magnitude go to that board without those two critical people there. So it certainly has been the budget story of the summer. It's always amazing how an $800 million budget can have a $700,000 sidetrack. But we'll get there to the finish line. And if for some reason we don't, and the commission thinks that it's not a good thing for the city of Fort Lauderdale, you'll know Chris to be one way, and that's, I'm not going to dig my heels in and say that Chris has to fight to be right. So I do think it is a good thing for our city. I think it strategically aligns us with an organization we want to be aligned with right now, and I think there's a major benefit that comes to us if we can find a way to bring that partnership on board. We'll talk about this, I think, in a special meeting where Greg is, so I'm going to leave it at that for tonight and just say, I know it's been chatted about out there, and I didn't want to come here and just put my head in the sand and not address it specifically. From here, the budget will be with a joint meeting with the Budget Advisory Board and the City Commission next Tuesday. It'll be in this room at 11:30. You'll have an opportunity to interact at that meeting with the Budget Advisory Board and the Commission if you want to, as well as it is set for 2 public hearings on September 3rd and September 12th. So those will be the 2 opportunities for the public to weigh in at a public meeting of the Commission if you have some things you want to weigh in on. You might say, how did you cut the rest of those dollars and how did you find that stuff? Let me highlight a couple ways and then I'll take questions. One way is that we really are, I thought I was going to get a presentation.
Sorry.
I followed an attorney, I didn't come with a presentation, and he said I had a slush fund. Don't think I was. Good, Chris. Right? So one of the things we did is we looked at how we delivered our projects. So I look at what the general fund, pays for. Let me take a public works project, for example. Let's take the Victoria Park water mains that are in the process of being installed right now. As a part of that project, we not only hire the construction company that does the work, but we also hire the architects, the engineers, the inspectors, the people that keep that project on track and do the inspections, etc. We have talented staff in our public works department that do that type of work on smaller projects. Like we might be doing there's a sewer cleanout project right now going on in Dorsey River Bend, and we might have some of our staff attached to that project, but we don't recover the costs of the work that they do in the project itself. The general fund has always absorbed that. Where if we were to go hire Hayes and Sawyer, we would pay them, wrong numbers, but we would pay them $50,000 to manage a project for us. We would be writing that check out of the project itself. Hayes and Sawyer performs the work, and we close the project out and move on. If we had our staff doing that, instead of writing a $50,000 check to Hayes and Sawyer, our staff would go out there and the general fund would just eat that expense. And I think that there's a real opportunity to actually have projects be budgeted and cost what the real project cost is, and not have the general fund subsidizing these projects, where in some circumstances we treat them one way and in other circumstances we treat them another. So we have created an internal services type department that will work much like the private sector. It'll bill their time by hours to the projects that they're actually attached to. And this is a way of driving accountability, but it's also a way of driving a true cost to each individual project. So that's a large chunk of it. We looked at the organization and said, why do we have some of these line items that doesn't seem like we ever spend the money that's in them? And the big one that we found this year was what we budgeted in previous years for travel and training of our employees. And, you know, I'm always reminded by that quote, or the saying that in bad times, you know, what if you train your employees and they become good employees and they leave? And the converse to that is, well, what if you don't and they stay? And, you know, so we have always been an organization that tries to develop professionally and encourage that, but we've really had no way of making sure that we are fair and equitable in how we distribute that amongst the 2,800 employees that we have in Fort Lauderdale. So we put a formula to that, and we looked at different funding categories, and frankly, we were able to right-size what I think we need to be able to conduct the exact same amount of training and professional development with our staff at about half the cost. And you know, I don't think there's anybody that's going to want for an opportunity. I just think that we have been sort of across the board budgeting, and it hasn't always aligned. And those dollars, you know, they roll into roll over year to year back to a fund balance and have to be reappropriated. But you know, I find that sometimes when we have these inflated is probably the wrong word. Alan would use the word slush. No, I know that because he already did. Is that we allow departments interdepartmentally to move money from account to account, and only when it crosses departments does it require a full budget amendment of the commission. And there are places where budgets are used to say, you know, when I need to spend that, I can just, you know, I'll have that with dollars accounted for in salary savings, or I'll have it in our grant match account, or I'll have it in professional development. So we're just putting some tighter controls on the budget and where dollars are positioned and how they move. I can tell you that we have one of the most talented budget teams in the world, maybe led by Laura Reese, who's in the audience. She and her team have kept me on my toes every step of the way. We started early. One thing you'll see in the budget, and then I'm going to turn it to questions because I know we'll still have one more presenter after me, is you will see if you read our budget this year where we specifically highlight dollars that are allocated to commission's top and high priorities. They go and do their retreat this year we did it in January because we wanted to get to them early. What comes out of that is their top and high priorities for the year. And we've never had really a tie of their top and high priorities to the budget itself. And if you don't have a tie of priorities to the dollars, you have ideas. And so in this budget, there is an actual matrix that shows those funds which exist to continue an effort and those funds which have been added to address the commission's top and high priorities. So it really, in a quick glance, you can see how the city has not only heard what this policy-making body has said is important, but we've figured out how to identify funding to put towards it as well. I could go on and on and on and would love to, but I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you. Go back to the Hazen and Sawyer. Marilyn Malo, Harbordale Civic. Could you go back to the Hazen and Sawyer example?
Sure.
Of trying to allocate the cost of managing the project to a consultant and paying the consultant, but you're still paying the salaries of all the people who were doing that job previously. How does that save money?
So it causes us not to, it causes us to right-size the projects that are budgeted. Because if we had what we thought was funding sufficient for 10 projects, and all of a sudden the general fund would absorb the oversight of those projects, either from an architectural engineering perspective, we really might, in a real world, if we look at what it costs to actually manage those, we might only have 9 real projects as opposed to 10. And so, you know, it causes us to put the available dollars that we have to the actual work itself, and it not just be a subsidy essentially from the general fund to be the oversight.
But I still don't understand how you save any money.
You're not outsourcing as much.
No, it's not
a question of outsourcing. You are outsourcing.
In all of the bigger projects,
which is fine.
Yeah, we don't have the bench strength to do that. So
some projects it's perfectly fine to outsource, but every time you outsource, if you're going to save money, because you're still outsourcing. I mean, are you telling us it costs less for Hazen and Sawyer to run the project than for our staff to run the project?
No, I'm telling you, we are just accounting for the dollars that we spend in a different way, so that I can.
This is a bookkeeping thing. This is not a real physical thing that we're having. The 10 people who were doing the project previously are still on our payroll being paid, but now we're also paying Hazen and Sawyer.
No.
I still don't know, then I'm not.
No.
And she agrees.
She agrees? No, so there would be an example where we wouldn't duplicate. So if we are having, and I shouldn't necessarily use a company name,
That's okay.
but pick ABC company, and we'll take Hayes and Sawyer out of it. If we're using somebody else to do the project management or project review on a project, we'll supplement that with our people. That is something that goes to ABC Construction Company. But we have a lot of very mid to smaller size projects that we design, that we oversee, that, we've got architects that sit downstairs on the 4th floor, we've got engineers, they're actually, doing CAD drawings and then construct from the CAD drawings. Those folks, the general fund pays for every day.
And they're going to still be there, and they're going to be working on other projects.
Correct.
Okay.
But they can bill their work to the projects themselves, and so we actually, if the real project costs $100,000, and so if we do a project and it costs $100,000, and ABC Construction Company did the project and had their $100,000, if any of that $100,000 was in engineering, architecture, or oversight, that would be a part of the project cost itself. We would not have, in prior years, we would not have shown that as part of our project cost. It would have just been something where, you're right, we're paying the salaries out of the general fund. We were able to take these general fund positions and create an internal services type fund to be able to support these projects.
But just let me follow up on that. If you're paying now ABC Company to run the sewer project as opposed to the staff running the sewer project, that money now comes out of the enterprise funds. Is that how you save the money? So you're charging the enterprise funds
Correct.
for the work
For the
that
project
city,
itself.
for the work that the city was doing.
Correct.
And, okay, well, that's, all right, now I understand.
Correct.
I hope everybody else understands
No, I
that.
don't have any idea what
We just took $200 million bonds to build water and sewer projects, okay? We are now going to be charging to that $200 million the cost of the staff, the city staff who are overseeing the project. We're moving that cost into the enterprise funds. We're not saving any money globally.
Correct.
We're just moving funds from one budget to another.
It's different.
Which actually lowers the cost in the general fund.
Correct.
I understand where the money's coming from, but
So I can
all of
give
it
you
is our money.
quick little true, but I can give you a quick 30-second, true sort of, but let's use the utility as an example, because that's a great example. We provide, so let's use the sewer, let's use water, because water near and dear to me right now, since we can't seem to keep it in the pipes. Let's say, so we, a real small project, water main project. The water utility runs as a utility, which means that it is a ratepayer-based utility system. So we know it costs a certain amount of money to run a water system, and the people that pay their water bill are going to be the people through some rate study that make the payments for the water system to run. Now, we provide water well beyond the border of Fort Lauderdale. So we provide water to Wilton Manors, to Tamarack, to the port, to the airport at times. My goodness, that was lightning. So we receive rates paid from people who are not in Fort Lauderdale. So if all of a sudden we do a water project and we bill the project management cost to the utility, we're billing it to an enterprise fund that has ratepayers that are outside of the city of Fort Lauderdale paying into it. If we allow the correct, but if we allow the general fund to do it,
we're paying the
then
whole
it's
thing.
Fort Lauderdale 100%. And so it makes more sense in my mind for the utility or any of the enterprise funds that we run as small businesses.
But that was the same logic that got us into the ROI in the first place. The money was coming not only from us, it was coming from Tamarack and the other people as well.
I think it makes sense to keep it there as opposed to transferring it out.
Oh, no, we definitely are out of the
Put it to
ROI.
the infrastructure projects that need to be done.
No question about that. I'm just saying that this idea of taking the money to manage the project, which we were using the capital funds to manage the project, and shifting it over into the enterprise funds, solves our budget problem in terms of the numbers, but it's all the same money. Yes, Tamarack is paying a little bit of it more than, it's 25% versus 75%. And if I lived in Tamarack, I would be suing you because I'm now paying for your, that's true. But putting that aside for a minute, it's a budgetary movement from one fund to another fund. We are not actually saving any money. We're just changing it to another fund.
It uses the funds that should be paying for the project to pay for the project.
It's allocated to that.
So
It's allocated to that.
this, Colleen, I'll just say something. So this is a high-level presentation of a very large budget. And this is a very thoughtful, I think, well-thought-out approach to examining how we can allocate funds responsibly in a fiscally, financially responsible manner that is above board. I think we can drill down into specific aspects of the budget, but if it's not appropriate to put money in a certain bucket, it wouldn't have been done. It is appropriate. I think this has been a marvelous example of a very responsible approach to managing fiscally our budget challenges. That's my sense. Do we ever have any other high-level questions? Because we got to move on and have our last presentation.
I just wanted
Oh,
to
dear.
add
Okay.
one other thing. Janae Gray Williams once again, and in regards to the outsourcing, my question to you, Mr. Chris, is would there be a look at any other departments for the future when it comes to outsourcing services and still being able to maintain or retain the employees and be able to disperse them throughout the city of Fort Lauderdale like we did with this, in which that deserves an applaud that you did not give anyone kudos.
Right. So that's a thank you. It's so good to see you.
You're welcome.
She gives me the best hugs when I see her, when she's not like embedded in a crowd of people. So outsourcing is a bigger discussion for a bigger day. Outsource is, I sort of term this more to be a partnership with another government organization as opposed to outsource. Sometimes we see outsource in the form of private companies come in and do things for you. That is popular in some places, and for 10 minutes I can tell you why, and it's unpopular in other places, and for 10 minutes I can tell you why too, and I can get on both sides of the fence. I think there's opportunity to look at outsource opportunities in certain circumstances when we don't need the service 365 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And an example I give is, and this is not true in Florida, because we grow grass all year round, but in a climate where maybe you would have snow and you have right-of-way maintenance to do, and you hire people that mow lawns or mow grass and mow right-of-way, when you only need that 8 months out of the year, you shouldn't be paying for it for the 4 months that you don't. And there I would look towards a model by saying, for these 8 months we need it, so we probably can buy those services from a landscape company as opposed to having 4 months worth of public dollars being invested in somebody who can't push a lawnmower. And so, that doesn't exist here, so, we've got lots of people that mow grass. But, that's sort of the thought process and maybe the methodology behind outsource. You're not going to see anything in this budget. I'm mindful to the fact, too, that there's different social and different political climates where things are liked and welcomed more than they are other places. I can tell you that we're a very employee-driven organization, and we support our employees and want to do right by them. And I get the sense that the community is supportive of that methodology as well. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to echo the accolade that you gave to Laura and also yourself. I was one of multiple citizens who probably dissected the budget in more detail than I would like to. I sent you over probably 150 questions that you answered all in writing and very expeditiously. And it just was really culture-changing, innovative, and transparent. That's the first comment. The second comment is one I would challenge the Civic Association a bit on. is regards to supporting a rise in the millage rate. With all the bonds and so forth that we're issuing, a number of them, say the police building and the parks, the 300 million, but over 20 years, it's doubled that in interest. That's a burden on the taxpayers. We also have other bonds, stormwater and so forth, where the fees essentially go to residents themselves. And I'm concerned when we hear from one of your departments that lower socioeconomic status folks here pay 60% of their income in housing and transportation. It concerns me that we're stacking on fee after fee for this cost recovery, and eventually it's going to come a point where it's going to make people homeless, move out of the city, not afford to have their own homes, and so forth. And it's just something I would urge the association to consider, is to give a voice to raise the millage rate. We raise at one point, it's 35 million in a year, I think Maryland's told us.
Something like that.
And that may not be much when you consider that probably all that interest and principal is going to amount to 250 million a year. But with compounding it, it's going to have a big effect over the long run. And I would just ask the association at some point to discuss giving their support for a rise in the millage rate.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have discussed this at the board level. I don't know if we officially voted or not, but why don't we bring this up again? Because if elected officials are obviously not in a position to kind of push this on their own, we can support that as something to support the underserved in our community. I think it's well worth it. And remove it as an election issue.
Right. I can tell you that I did look at that this year. I certainly can't poll the commission, but I can get a sense as to where they are, and I wanted to bring them a budget that I felt that I could get support for, and I didn't feel was the right year to put them in that position. But after we get through the elections next year, maybe that's the right time.
What is the millage rate that's going to be on the trip notice that the commission approved?
4.1193.
Okay.
That was Dennis Ulmer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
August 22nd. That's coming up.
That's coming up. All right.
No, it'll be on my calendar. All right.
Right.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. So, bringing up our last speaker,
See, now you said you didn't say it.
Chief Magliani. Thank you. So, Chief Magliani, Chief of Fort Lauderdale PD, joined the police force in 92?
92.
Doesn't look that old.
Should have seen me in 92.
He was promoted to the rank of major in 2014, and got named interim chief in 2017, I think.
Yes.
Now full chief, very widely known in the community for his compassion and deep involvement and innovation in the department. He's here to introduce our final speaker. I turn it over to the chief.
Thank you. I'm not going to take up much time really just to do an introduction, but I want Ms. Danielle Wolf to come up, and she's going to speak to you a little bit about an application we use called Safer Watch. And it's a really neat application, and it's got some great features where it allows our neighbors to report tips to us that might not necessarily necessitate a call to 911. If you notice change in behaviors, someone you want us to check out, something that will go to our threat response unit that they can look into to see if we need to take some action prior to any type of tragedy occurring. But what she's really going to explain tonight is the alert feature, which is why I would encourage folks to use this app. This is the official platform that the Fort Lauderdale Police Department uses to notify folks of in-progress emergencies, and we also use it for non-emergency alerts too. We don't feel like you should have to sift through Twitter and hear what Prince whoever's naming his baby and whatever Cardi B's doing, and then find something from the Fort Lauderdale Police Department on Twitter that we feel we wanted something that would be strictly used for emergency and non-emergency information that our neighbors need to have, and then she'll explain the geofencing feature as well. This is one of the new partnerships that we've engaged in, and we've done a lot of creative things that you're aware of, FLPD Cares and the Bar Watch program, our partnership with Ring and our partnership with Safer Watch. And if I haven't announced it yet, to everybody, 2018 was the lowest citywide crime rate since we've been keeping those records back in the 70s. So the things we're doing are working. It's a partnership. It's a partnership with our neighbors, a partnership with all of our HOAs and our civic association. So this is just one more thing we're doing. And if she forgets to say, the best part is it's free to all of you. So, without further ado, I'll introduce Miss Danielle Wolf, who came all the way down from Jacksonville to talk to you tonight.
Thank you. However, we are based very nearby in Boca, so even though I'm from Jacksonville, and go Duval, I still love to come visit you. And we have several customers and law enforcement agencies that we're working with in South Florida. And I'm very honored to be here this evening. And just, we all are experiencing these tragedies that are going on. And one of the common things, if you look at all of them, is that everyone had some little piece of information about, some of these things that we've seen, and even last week and the week before. Someone had a piece of intel that they knew about an individual. So really, the reason why Safer Watch was started is to be able to give all citizens the ability to report things, suspicious things, as they see them occurring. Because really, we all know the adage, if you see something, say something. But how many people are really going up to your local lieutenant here and saying, there was someone laying on the ground there, I'm not really sure if they're passed out, if they're not breathing. People aren't necessarily doing that, and people aren't necessarily calling the non-emergency phone numbers. They don't have them programmed in their phones. But what people are doing is grabbing this right here, and they're taking a picture, and they're posting it on Facebook, they're posting it on Instagram. But the problem is that information and that intel, where's it going? Nowhere. This is where it needs to go. It needs to go to the good guys. So, this is why Safer Watch was started. And as Chief mentioned, it is 100% free to anyone here. And I'm going to show you how you can download the app and how you can communicate it out to the community so that other citizens can be engaged. So there's two major functions of the solution of Safer Watch. The first one is, again, if you see something suspicious, you have the ability to take pictures, to take video, to record audio, and be able to send that into a place where it's going to be actually utilized and then followed up on in a safe manner. So what you're seeing here is just an example of, this could be at a school, a kid sees somebody being bullied, for example, they could take a picture, that information then goes into the local law enforcement. And there are multiple categories that you can choose from. So that's one thing that you're able to do. I have never had anyone call me and say, how do you do this? How do you report a tip? It's very, very user-friendly. Kids can use it, and we've actually had several tips that have been submitted by kids. But this is where it gets really interesting for your communities and for the citizens that live in your HOAs and the communities. We have geofenced all of the neighborhoods within the Fort Lauderdale city limits. So if you download the app, there is at the very top part, you will see there is the ability to drop down and choose what neighborhood you live in, and you will be able to receive specific alerts for that neighborhood. Now, he might decide, oh my goodness, this is something that's affecting our entire city. I'm going to send out a major alert to everyone. But you also have the ability to sign up for alerts in your particular community. Everyone's received an Amber Alert, right? It doesn't, it's from 4 counties over. You can't really reply to it. It doesn't necessarily apply to you. Well, when I show you our alerts, I think you'll find there's a good reason for you to be signing up for this. It's free. Okay? What our goal is for no matter where you are, for you to be able to receive messages about non-emergencies that might be affecting your quality of life, or about emergencies that are affecting your quality of life that you need to listen to law enforcement. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. There's one way you can receive it through, there's an online portal, which I'll show you in just a moment. It's called FLPDalerts.com. You can also receive it through our mobile app. Again, very easy to download. You can download this in the Google or iOS stores. I'll show you in just a moment. You can receive geo-targeted alerts for communities that you sign up for. Or if he says it's a super emergency, we're going to send out a communication to a specific area. These are some of the types of communications that are being sent out. And I have to applaud Fort Lauderdale PD because they are really utilizing this communication. For those of you who have downloaded it, you've probably started seeing this. Some of the emergency ones, I'll give you an example. I think I was in vacation in Aruba and I received one about a bank robbery. I received this because I had signed up on the app to receive notifications from Fort Lauderdale, and I received that communication while I was traveling. So that's how powerful the app is. So even though you're not in the country, you can still receive communication. So non-emergency might be something like, hey, they're going to be doing some sort of testing, or maybe there's a tree down, or maybe there's a fire hydrant shooting up in the air and it's blocking some traffic. These are some of the communications that are being pushed out. These are some examples of real-time notifications. So here's one from Broward County. The very first one was about a school lockdown. The next one is about a traffic disruption. And again, these are, now if you think about what an Amber Alert looks like, these are our version of a Safer Watch Alert. You have pictures, you have videos, you have communication. You can do two-way communication. If you notice here, it says, I don't know if you can see here, it says comments or updates. There can be multiple updates so that if there's an emergency situation, chief can let you know that everything's all clear now. And for the missing adult, missing child, those are real case incidents where those kids and that missing person who is an endangered adult with a mental illness, they were actually found very quickly due to the fact that the app was able to push that communication out. Another example, water main break in Fort Lauderdale, the Broward Courthouse. As you can see, the water main break, water disruption, and maintenance and closure. So these are all the types of alerts that you can be receiving. Here's another use case of Dillard High School. This was regarding a code red event. So you're seeing here there's active police in the area. Then it shows there's an update, and then it shows at the end, again, all clear. Very different than an Amber Alert. No pictures, no addresses, no real information. This is real-time information that's getting to you immediately and to all citizens. And here's another one this is another great use. So there was a bomb threat. And this was information that was sent out. And exactly, you can see there was an update. So on my phone, even in Jacksonville, I'm receiving a notification because I've signed up to receive alerts from Fort Lauderdale Police Department. I'm receiving these updates as well. Here's another example of a use case of how Safer Watch has been used. So these are really good for the community, because if you don't know what's going on, you might be going right into the middle of a situation, but if you keep your phone on, you have your Safer Watch app downloaded, you will know what's going on in your community, emergency or non-emergency. And these are, again, some of the examples of the differences between Amber Alert. So again, we can send out geo-targeted alerts that are two-way, so that if I send you an alert, you can reply back to me when I say, hi, I'm in Fort Lauderdale PD. And then you can also send out photos, videos, and have updates. So I'm here to help you guys get this out to the community. And so I've left some information on the table along with my business card, and I'm more than happy to provide some more information that you can disseminate within your communities, a PDF, some other things. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, Chief. Lots of questions coming out.
One thing, and then questions, and I'll tell you what put me over the edge to look for something like Safer Watch. And I love the ability to receive tips, but obviously you can call 911. In fact, this isn't a replacement for 911 if there's an emergency. But you can send us emails, you can send us a letter in the mail if you want to. You can walk up to someone. The ability to receive tips is great, but what really put me over the edge was our ability to send out alerts. And if you remember, we had a shooting by the downtown library. And we got a call from a business, and I won't name who they are, and they said, you never told us, we didn't know if we should go on lockdown, there's a lot of people in the building. And I started thinking about it. Well, there's hundreds of businesses within a square mile of the downtown, and the two guys working at the Subway shop deserve to know as much as, the thousands of people at Broward College down there. It's different when it's a school, God forbid, goes on lockdown, it's in a residential neighborhood, it's a little easier, but how do I notify people that work at City Hall and walked across there for lunch? So we wanted a way, and there's no way that, the time would allow us to somehow reach out to every single business and let them know what's going on, much less hit everybody down there who has a cell phone. So if you're in that geo-fenced area where now we can say, this happened, a description of the guy, we got more eyes and ears out there, you can take proper safety precautions like locking your doors. We needed a way to get this out to everybody. So anybody who has that app, if you're walking around downtown, if you have a business down there, it's a way we can put something out on Safer Watch and everybody is notified at once. That's what really put me over the edge, because it's a way we can make our neighbors safer. And if you're in that circle that we drop, everybody gets the alert at the same time and what's going on.
The other thing is too, think about the Tortuga Festival and also the Air and Sea Show. We were the main safety and security application for those events, and we're doing those large type of events so that when you do have the influx of visitors coming to the city, they have a way to communicate to law enforcement, and law enforcement has a way to communicate to them as well.
Who has a home phone anymore? That reverse 911, the ability to get home. A few of you, but a lot of people don't. This way you sign up, it follows you. It follows you in your phone. I don't have a phone in my house anymore, so if something was going on and they were going to ring my home, it's not going anywhere. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Two questions here. First, sorry. Christina, then Will and Cal.
Okay. My first question, it's for either of you. Christina Curry from Rio Vista. So are the messages that I would receive if I have that, do they only come from the police department? Because I would have no interest in hearing what my neighbor thinks is suspicious.
Only the police department.
Correct. Okay. Then the other thing is regarding the geofence.
Next door is for what your neighbor
Okay.
thinks.
Yeah, I want you to do a better job of distinguishing this project from next door.
This is not a block. This is an alert
Please,
system
please.
and a tip reception
Okay,
system.
thank you. With regards to the geofence, if I want to know my neighborhood and I also want to know the neighborhood of where my children go to school, can I do that? I don't
Yes, you
have to
can.
have like a verification for the neighborhoods I choose?
No.
Okay. And then my last question is, what do your statistics look like on how this has benefited your productivity?
Well, I would say this hasn't really, us giving out the alerts should help improve your life on a daily basis. For example, when some power poles fell down on Sunrise Boulevard, we put something out, to avoid that area, you don't get stuck in a traffic jam. And the best thing about it is we also put something out when the situation is resolved. So when it comes to, like Danielle said, quality of life and you navigating through the city, it's a huge benefit, especially when there's major events. You can even get alerts if you're visiting and you can sign up for it. When it comes to the emergency alerts, I don't know we don't have any results on how that's helped anybody other than they have the information.
I think I should have been more specific with regards to the tips aspect.
Like I said, this isn't a situation where it's used in place of 911, but I'm just going to pick general terms. Let's say you have a coworker, arrives early every day, goes home late, dressed to the nines, 1,000% committed to his job, and now you notice, lately he's not dressing so much, he's coming in late, he doesn't care anymore, he's talking about how he can understand how, when you see an active killer story on TV, hey, I can kind of get why people do that. That's not something you call 911 on, but you go, hey, I want somebody to know, I want someone to check this out. That's the kind of information we want. You can include pictures, and you look at a lot of the things going on in the school where, law enforcement wants all this information on the bad kids. The starting quarterback who throws the freshman in the garbage can isn't usually your active killer. It's the other side of that equation, the kid who was bullied, the kid who was rejected, maybe the kid who didn't get in trouble. But you notice, this guy, distancing himself from everybody, and that's the information we want. And by the way, all the Broward County schools are using Safer Watch.
So I can give you some general statistics. So the Safer Watch app has been live in the South Florida area for a little over a year now, and we have prevented 5 school shootings, and we have made multiple arrests for sex offenders, for drugs, and we have also prevented 3 school suicides, students within schools that were claiming that they were going to commit suicide, that those were actual tips that came in from other students. So, yeah.
It really gets you comfortable with, I don't want to call the police on this guy, and I sure don't want them to know it's me, but it's weird, and like I said, with us, these things go to our threat response unit. So obviously, any crime in progress, 911.
And
you want us to check something out, it goes to our threat response unit, which we have a full-time staff of detectives that are on the threat response team, as well as a lot of people that are part-timers on the team that are trained in it, so it's very helpful.
Okay, this is an example of submitting a tip, too. It's very simple to use. Just as the chief was saying, it's really that middle layer of an between an emergency and, oh, I see something that looks a little bit off. Just, like I said, someone's sleeping on the ground. Is that person asleep? Are they passed out? That's something you can submit.
And you can remain anonymous.
Yes.
When you submit. Is that someone's question?
All right, so we've got like 3 or 4 questions, then we're gonna have to shut it down, and the order is Dr. Kelly, young man in front, young lady in back. All right. It's coming.
Can
That's your name.
the app follow you around as you go from place to place without you having to
Yes.
sign up for a neighborhood? Like, I live in Bermuda Riviera, North Gulf Island. If I go downtown,
If you go to Coral Gables,
even if I don't
and you have to
sign up for it,
you have to sign up for the app, you have to download the app.
but I don't have to download the neighborhood I'm going to.
No, you do not.
Listen.
No, you do not. So if you came up to Atlantic Beach, which is in Jacksonville, and you had the Safer Watch app, which is where the next, the Blue Angels are going to be performing, for example, in Jacksonville, and at the beach, then you happen to be there for that event, you already have the app, because you live down here, when you go up there, you would receive alerts from Atlantic Beach.
And you get alerts about what's going on in
The
Bermuda
goal
Riviera.
is,
Okay. It tracks you.
yes, the goal is for it to be everywhere throughout the state, so that no matter where you go, is that seamless communication.
If I have my phone on, hi Kelly Manning, River Oaks. If I have my phone on silent, is it still gonna alert?
You'll still get an alert, but you won't get the loud beep, beep. So if it's in the middle of the night and he sends something, you're not gonna, you wouldn't necessarily get that. No. But you would receive the alert, yes.
Last 2 questions?
But it won't make noise?
Not if you have your volume turned off, no.
Okay, thank you.
Dan O'Connor, Green Fire Department. My question is, I understand it's free. Is it advertising supported? Are you harvesting our data? How do we know? Does the city pay for it?
Yes.
Okay, the city pays for it. So you're not harvesting our data?
No,
Because the
absolutely.
terms, I read the terms of agreement, terms of use.
Sure.
And it wasn't very, my opinion, wasn't very privacy friendly. It seemed to me, maybe it changed in the last couple months, but it seemed to me like you had the ability to collect and analyze and you didn't say all the data was staying inside your universe. And I don't know if that's something that's come up before.
So we get a lot of questions regarding public records, and essentially the way the data works is if you choose to be anonymous, then you are anonymous. If something you submit, you become the subject of a criminal investigation, law enforcement has the ability to request information from us. So that's
They're not asking for credit card information.
Yeah,
They
the people who are signing up for this app are people who want to be able to help the community and report suspicious activity if they see it occurring. Does that answer your question?
It does.
We're not gonna, if a news station calls us and asks for information, we're not gonna give out anybody's information. Does that answer the question? We're specifically, we're partnered with law enforcement and it's their information.
I'm more concerned about like the way most free apps, quote unquote, you know, whether it's Google or, you know, any of them, we all know that they're basically taking our data on the back end.
No, we don't advertise, we don't take your.
Yeah, this isn't a free app.
This
We
is-
pay for it.
Yeah.
It's
This
free
is-
to all of you.
It's free to
Okay.
citizens,
You
but
won't
we're
get
not
one ad.
data mining citizens.
That's good to know. This is-
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody's paying for it. That means we're not.
Yeah, our entire board is ex-law enforcement or current law enforcement, so we're really about helping keep communities safer. We're not about mining data.
Last question?
Hi, Barbara McGill from Lauderdale Harbor. So I spent the last couple of years getting everyone in our community onto Code Red. Are you still using that as well? Is this something we should be on both, or? This question?
The code red isn't really a function of the police department only, though. This is just alerts that we physically send out from the police department. And to actually address the alert thing, you won't get bothered all night, like Danielle said, with non-emergency things if you don't want to hear them. But an emergency alert, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to get the noise whether you're on silent or not. Like an Amber Alert, you might not. You get it's a definitely distinct sound when it's an emergency as opposed to non-emergency. This is us. We use the Safer Watch app, but this is we, the lieutenants at night. They are the ones who put out the alerts specifically about what we want you to know, updates, and when it's concluded, right out of the police department only, and nobody else touches it.
So what's the difference between that and code red?
The police department doesn't really put out a lot of things through code red.
Oh, okay.
That's a citizen.
Yeah.
Code red is interactive.
It's an inactive, isn't it?
Yeah, this is what just PE uses, no one else touches it.
So I think the answer is both, right? And add this for law enforcement. And so we can have Safer Watch back if you'd be willing to come back. Encourage everyone to download the app, learn about it. And Louis had his hand raised to say
I wanted
something.
to ask the chief if you're still supporting the neighbors application through Ring. Is that part we're still doing, or?
Absolutely. Ring is a completely different thing. Ring, and we don't support the product Ring, the Ring doorbell stuff, but there's an application called Neighbors that there's actually a law enforcement portal. That's really to help us apprehend criminals. This is more threat detection and our ability to put out alerts. Ring is ability for us, we can geofence. We can drop a geofence and go through the law enforcement portal and say, we had a burglary in this area, has anybody checked your cameras, seen anything? And we ask you, we can't jump into it like some people might think, ask if you would share your video. The amount of people we've apprehended off of Ring is insane. And again, completely free. If you happen to win a doorbell, because we gave some out to completely free for the neighbors app and completely free for us.
Right. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
If anybody has any more questions about any of the programs we're doing, call me. And I will get you to the right person, or I will answer it myself.
And we'll also put this information on the website, along with Alan's presentation, by the way. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to skip the president's report. We don't really have a committee update. Stan, do you want to do a real brief update on membership?
Yeah, we have 3 outstanding memberships, and one of them has moved to Colorado, and the other 2 I left messages for, and they aren't here tonight.
Wonderful.
So we're doing pretty good.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Eichelbaum. I should have referred to you. All right, so we've got 2 pieces of new business very briefly. Board Member Malo, do you want to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan discussion?
Yes, as you know, we had 2 meetings on the comprehensive plan and everybody sort of fell asleep. But it's very important, so the board had a special meeting to go deep dive into the comprehensive plan. And we are putting together our comments for the Planning and Zoning Board and the City Commission. We're going to be working on that between now and the next meeting, and hopefully we will have for your consideration comments that we think that the council should be making on the comprehensive plan. If anybody is interested, beyond the board members who were really spent 2-3 hours on this comments, if anybody else wants to participate in that comprehensive plan review, please talk to me and I'll get you on the email list and we'll make sure that you're part of the loop. But we hope to have for your consideration at the September meeting some comments that we believe we should be making on the comprehensive plan.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Board Member Curry, last but not least.
Okay, you heard the city attorney reference the interlocal agreement that is proposed between our city and the Broward MPO. And I put on the council website, you can go on there, you can see the notice to the special meeting. It's only 1 hour, so we have to have a very organized meeting. So after you go to this website, you can view the contract that he referenced on there. And in addition to viewing the contract, some of our board members, when we talked about it, I'm sorry, I have my back to you. When they talked about it, they said, oh, what about the surtax projects? How many master plans do neighborhood have? Things like that. So what I did was, I did a huge public records request to answer all of our board member questions. So you can go on here and look, and you can say, whatever, find your neighborhood anywhere you want, so that you can formulate a question. Before this special meeting, I need you to email me the questions, because we're not going to have the general process that we have of everybody, I have a question, I have a question. It has to be controlled, because we have 60 minutes to do it. So please go on the website, look at the notice, review the contract, and look at the public information. It's a ton of information, and you can see what they're doing, and then we can figure out how it does or does not affect us and ask educated questions. My email address is on there.
I just review the date and time.
And it's here, 8/22, 4:45 to 5:45 here in this room. I'm sorry for the time, it's all they had available, and we'll have Lagerbloom, we'll have Greg Stewart, who's the executive director of the Broward MPO, and also Ben Rogers, who's the interim director of our transportation here. So everybody who's involved, 4:45. Thank you.
I know this is going to be sent out, so when I go home tonight.
Correspondence, secretary will correspond.
Yeah.
Board member Pelican, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so, no, we're all trying to do this differently. Okay, old business? Any old business? I think we're good? For the good of the community?
Nothing good.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Exciting speakers coming up in September and October, too. We'll be sharing.